They told me there wouldn't be room this year. We're keeping it small, Mom, Joanna said, her voice syrupy and clipped the way you talk to someone you've already decided to exclude. It's just the kids and a few friends, you understand, right? I nodded. Though she couldn't see me, I was still holding the spoon from stirring the cranberry sauce, steam curling from the pot like breath in the cold. I said I understood. I lied. After the call, I didn't cry. I just stared at the empty dining table, the same table where I'd hosted 32 Thanksgivings. 32. The wood still gleamed from last year's polish, the lace runner still folded in the drawer. Everything still ready. Still waiting. That evening I bought a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store. No stuffing. No pie. Just something warm to fill the quiet. At home I set one place. A single napkin. I even lit a candle, like I had all those years when my husband carved the turkey and the grandkids begged for extra rolls. I tried to pray, but no words came. Just a refrigerator humming behind me. Then my phone buzzed. It was a Facebook notification. Joanna had been tagged in a post with Thanksgiving font, #blessed. I tapped it with a knuckle, afraid of what I might see. The photo loaded slowly. Then all at once. 18 people. 18. Laughter, wine glasses mid to clink, plates overflowing with food. My son, his wife, the grandkids. Even Joanna's college roommate, I recognized her frizzy curls. They were gathered around a long mahogany table. My mahogany table. The one I gave Joanna when she bought her house. The same white tablecloth I embroidered by hand. The green casserole dish with the chip on the side. My dish. I zoomed in. The sweet potato casserole. I taught her how to make it years ago. Extra marshmallows, I'd said, like it was sacred knowledge. Now I saw it in the photo. Burnt edges. No marshmallows. I didn't cry. I blew out the candle. I put the food in the fridge. Then I walked quietly to the sewing room and opened the memory chest. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside was a Polaroid from Thanksgiving 1989. My husband, God rest him, standing proudly at the head of the table, knife in hand, smiling like a man who knew what it meant to be surrounded. Am I? I sat with that photo a long time. Then I found a frame and set it in the mantel, right where the clock used to be. The next morning I boxed up a few things and drove to Joanna's. No fanfare. No confrontation. Just a quiet delivery at her doorstep. Inside the box, the family recipe book, the tablecloth, and a note written in my best cursive. For when you remember who taught you tradition. No signature. She'd know. I remembered a toast my husband used to give every year. We always make room, always. I could still hear the clink of glasses. Even Joanna's. That night I booked a trip to a little bed and breakfast in Savannah. Somewhere warm. Somewhere new. Christmas would be by the ocean this year. I wouldn't wait to be invited again. I posted a photo from the beach that December. Just me, a sun hat, and a slice of key lime pie. The caption read, "No turkey, no lies, just peace." My friends commented, "You deserve better." I replied, "I gave better for years." It was early November when the first hint arrived, quiet and announced, like a chill through an open window. I was folding the napkins I only brought out for holidays, the white ones with the tiny embroidered wheat stalks in the corners, when Joanna called again. She always called on Thursdays. Not out of sentiment, just part of her routine between errands and emails. I cradled the phone between my cheek and shoulder, smoothing the last napkin with my palm. "Hi, Mom. Quick thing, we're thinking of doing something small this year for Thanksgiving." My hand stilled. "Oh?" I said lightly, reaching for another napkin. "Smaller?" "Yes," she continued, already rushing through this sentence like she didn't want to hear herself say it. "Just the kids. Andrew's boss might drop by, and a few of the neighbours. It's really casual, you know, with everything going on." Everything. That fake fog they always mention now. The kids' school schedules. Joanna's yoga retreat. Andrew's new project. Things I'm meant to understand without questioning. "I see," I said, adjusting a fold. There was a pause. "You understand, right?" she asked. I glanced at the dining table. 8 chairs. Still polished. Still waiting. "Of course," I said. That was the first dismissal. Not sharp. Not cruel. Just efficient. Like I'd become an ingredient too complicated for their recipe. She didn't ask if I'd already started cooking, if the cranberry sauce was cooling in the fridge, if I'd pulled out the leaf extension for the table. She didn't ask, and I didn't tell her. After the call, I stood in the kitchen, holding a napkin that no one would use. The soft cotton felt thinner this year. Or maybe my fingers did. I put them away heavily in the drawer beside the recipe cards tucked between the gravy ladle and the corkscrew. I still planned to make something maybe not feast, but enough. Enough to remind myself it was a holiday, even if I spent it alone. That night, I watched a movie I'd seen 100 times. I wasn't watching it, really. Just letting the sound fill the room. Then a moment caught me. A scene at a long table, family passing plates, laughter, the kind that's messy and warm. A young woman reaches for a dish and says, "No one makes it like Grandma." I paused the screen. Let the image freeze. No one makes it like Grandma. Except this year, no one had asked. The next morning, I went to the grocery store early. I told myself it was to beat the rush, but the aisles were nearly empty. I passed a young couple debating stuffing mix. A boy begging his mother for the turkey-shaped cookies. An older man inspecting green beans like they were foreign objects. I reached for a small rotisserie chicken. Not turkey too much for one. No stuffing. No pie crust. Just something warm to fill the quiet. I placed it gently in the basket beside a single sweet potato, a can of cranberry sauce, and a small carton of cream. Then I walked past the floral section, where bouquets of mums and marigolds sat in the cellophane, waiting to be chosen. I picked one. Yellow. Bright. Foolishly hopeful. At the checkout, the young girl ran up my items with the speed of someone wishing the day away. "Holiday plans?" she asked without looking up. I hesitated. "Just me this year," I said. She smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's the best." Maybe. At home, I washed the good plate. Set one place. Folded a napkin. I lit a candle that night at dinner. I didn't know why. Just something about the flame, the flicker, felt necessary. I tried to pray. But no words came. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator behind me. And the steady, unshaken beat of being quietly left out. Not forgotten. Just inconvenient. That's worse. It didn't happen all at once, this vanishing. It crept in quietly, like dust on the windowsill, settling in unnoticed until one day you realized you couldn't see out. My mornings used to begin with noise. The radio, the kettle, the shuffle of feet, children running late, my husband humming, the dog barking, and nothing in particular. Now it's silence. I still wake early. Years of habit have trained my body to rise at dawn, even if there's no need. I make my bed with corners tucked, just as I always have. I boil water for tea, though I no longer use the fancy leaves, just a simple bag and a chipped mug. I still set 2 cups. I forget sometimes. Or maybe I don't. The other one stays empty, growing cold beside me as I read the newspaper out loud like someone might still be listening. I cook breakfast not out of hunger, but to fill the space. 2 eggs scrambled. Toast dry. 1 slice. I used to make pancakes every Saturday. Joanna liked hers with extra syrup. Andrew wanted bacon crispy enough to snap. I learned all their preferences like songs. Now I eat in the quiet, looking out the window at the hedges I trim myself. Mid-morning, I dust the living room. Not because it needs it, but because it gives my hands something to do. I touch every picture frame. Straighten them. Wipe away the fingerprints that no one leaves anymore. There's a photo of Joanna from when she was 5, missing her 2 front teeth, holding a pumpkin twice her size. I stare at it longer than I should. The light in her eyes back then, it's not the same now. Or maybe the difference is in me. Sometimes I call people just to hear a voice. Not Joanna, she rarely picks up. But the pharmacy. The bank. The gas company. I ask questions I already know the answers to. Can you confirm my balance? What time do you close today? I thank them like they've done me a kindness. Because in a way, they have. The afternoons are hardest. That's when a house begins to feel too still, like it's waiting for something that never arrives. I water the plants. Fold laundry I didn't wear. Reorganize drawers. I found 3 birthday cards last week I'd bought months ago for people who never came. I thought about sending one to myself. Dinner used to be a performance. I'd wear an apron, play music, taste everything twice. I knew how to make a table feel like a welcome. Now it's a plate balanced on my knees, the television flickering nonsense in the background. Something easy to chew. Something that doesn't remind me of gathering. I still keep the good dishes in the cabinet, though I haven't used them in years. Joanna once said, "You don't need all this anymore." But what does that mean to not need beautiful things? To not deserve them? At night, I climb into bed with my book. I reread the same chapter 5 times. The words blur. Not because I'm tired, because my mind drifts. To a time when bedtime meant checking locks, turning off lights, kissing foreheads. Now I just turn off the lamp. No one calls to say goodnight. And still I hope. That's the cruel part. Hope doesn't leave when the door stays closed. It waits with its hand on your shoulder, whispering, maybe tomorrow. And every time you listen, you raise a little more of yourself. They don't ask how my doctor's appointment went. They don't ask what I'm reading. They don't ask what I need. Not because they're cruel, no, Joanna is polite. She says thanks when I send a card. She tells the kids to wave on the video calls. But there's a distance now. A filtered affection. Like I'm someone they knew once fondly, but with no place in their current arrangement. I sent her a pie recipe last week. The one she used to bake for every autumn. No reply. Later, I saw her post a photo of a store-bought pie on Instagram. The caption said, "Not the same as Mom's, but close enough. Close enough." Still more than silence. Because that's what I've become, a placeholder. A name in a phone. A voice they tolerate when the guilt grows loud. I used to be the centre of their holidays. The planner. The hostess. The one who remembered who liked dark meat and who hated green beans. Now I am the afterthought. Not invited, just informed. If they remember. So I adapt. I light candles in the evening, not for ambience, but because the soft flicker feels like company. I place the throw over the back of the couch. I read my old recipe cards like love letters to life I once had. I don't ask for visits. I don't beg for inclusion. I just wait. Until the waiting becomes its own kind of ache. And that's when it happened. The message. A friend had tagged Joanna in a Facebook post Thanksgiving photos. I wasn't looking for it. I hadn't even opened Facebook in weeks. But the notification buzzed, a small sound in the silence, and I tapped it. What loaded was not shocking, not exactly, but it hit all the same. 18 people. Laughter. Plates. Candles. A full table. And there in the corner my tablecloth. My dish. My family. I wasn't even mentioned. Not forgotten. Erased. I didn't look away from the screen. The photo glowed quietly in my dark kitchen. A long table, the one I gave Joanna, crowded with plates and glasses. My son pouring wine. My grandkids made laugh. Even the neighbour's boy, the one who used to mow my lawn, smiling between bites of sweet potatoes. There were no empty chairs. And there I sat across town, alone in a house that once overflowed with noise. My rotisserie chicken untouched. A single napkin folded beside it like a forgotten place card. I stared at the photo for a long time. Not because I needed more proof. I didn't. But because some part of me still hoped I'd see it differently in the second look. That maybe I'd missed something, a gesture, a sign, a sliver of space for me. But I wasn't there. Not even in mention. Not even in memory. And then, without willing it, my mind drifted back years ago to a different Thanksgiving. The smell of cinnamon and cloves filled the air. The oven door kept fogging up my glasses every time I bent to check the turkey. The children were underfoot, chasing each other with sock slides across the tile, and someone had dropped a spoon into the gravy. "Mom, the stuffing is burning." It wasn't. They always thought it was burning. I remember standing in the middle of the kitchen, my apron splattered, hair pinned up haphazardly, cheeks flushed from the heat, and smiling. Because this was what I lived for. The chaos, the interruptions, the feeling of being needed. Of being seen. Joanna was still in high school then. She was helping me fold napkins into the little fan shape she loved as a girl. "You should let me do Thanksgiving next year," she said with a teenage confidence that thinks love is easy. I smiled. "I'll let you try the green beans, baby steps." She rolled her eyes but kissed my cheek anyway. Someday I'm going to have a house big enough for everyone, and you'll just relax for once. I looked around at the steaming pots, the mismatched chairs crammed around the table, the paper took his tape to the wall. If you can top this, I said, I'll bring the pie. She laughed. Promise? I promise. I remembered how we all gathered in the dining room that evening. My husband, God, he looked so strong back then, stood up with his glass and gave the same toast he gave every year. We always make room, always. Everyone clinked glasses. Even little Henny with his milk. Even Joanna's best friend, the one who had nowhere to go that year. I remember watching her tuck into her plate like it was the first real meal she'd had in months. We had no formal seating. The chairs were borrowed from the church. The gravy boat was chipped. The pies were uneven. And it was perfect. Full. Messy. Real. That year, Joanna gave me a hand-drawn card. It said, "Thank you for cooking, Grandma," in bright orange marker with a handprint shaped like a turkey. I kept it for years. It was still in the memory chest, folded neatly, stained from time. Back in the present, I rose from my chair and went to that chest. It creaked open with the familiar groan of old hinges. I lifted the card out like a fragile relic. The edges had curled. The ink was faded. But the little heart she'd drawn in the corner still glowed. I pressed it to my chest, because there had been a time when I mattered. When my food was loved, not dismissed. When my traditions were cherished, not edited out. When my name was spoken with joy, not duty. That card, that memory, it held the shape of everything I'd built, the invisible scaffolding of family held together by care, by casseroles, by quiet sacrifice. And now, in a digital photo that hadn't even bothered to crop out the corner of my own tablecloth, I saw what had become of that legacy. Not passed down. Passed over. The casserole was burnt. The marshmallows forgotten. I could have wept, but I didn't. Instead, I closed the chest and carried the card to the living room. I placed it beside the framed Polaroid from 1989, the one where my husband carved the turkey and Joanna stood on a chair to reach the mashed potatoes. Side by side, the photo and the card formed a shrine of sorts. A reminder. Not to them. To me. Because memory is a kind of resistance. And I would not forget who I was, even if they had. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, and not because it paired with anything, but because it felt ceremonial. I toasted the past. To the woman I was, I whispered. And the woman I still am. Then I took a sip and sat in the quiet. The refrigerator hummed behind me. But this time, I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. 2 days after Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Joanna. I blinked at the screen, the unexpected glow cutting through the early dusk. It was nearly 5 o'clock, the Iowan shadows lengthened across the tile and the radiator groaned with fatigue. I had just finished folding a load of towels. My hands were still warm from the dryer. I stared at the notification and not opening it right away. Just stared. For a moment so brief it barely existed, and my chest lifted. Maybe she'd remembered. Maybe she was sorry. Maybe she'd realized the casserole dish she used wasn't just glass, but something passed through hands, through holidays, through memory. I opened the message. It read, "Hope you had a good weekend. We ended up with so much food you want me to drop off leftovers." That was it. Not "we missed you." Not "I'm sorry we didn't include you." Not "we should have made room." Just leftovers. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, the folded towel still in my hands. The warmth of it had already begun to fade. Leftovers. A peace offering wrapped in foil. A consolation prize for someone who hadn't even been invited to the race. I didn't respond right away. I walked to the fridge, opened the door, and stared at the half-chicken still sealed in its container. And touched. I'd never even sliced into it. I thought about replying something polite, neutral. "Thanks, but I'm all set. Borrow." "No need, I have plenty here." Instead, I closed the fridge door and set the phone down face down on the counter. I sat at the table. The candle from Thanksgiving still stood in the centre. Wickham burned. I hadn't lit it since that first night. I didn't know why I had left it there. Some part of me had believed I might still. I reached for the matchbook in the drawer. Struck one. The flame flickered, stuttered, then caught. And I watched it the way you watch something that doesn't realize it's alone. A week before, I'd made a list not on paper, just in my mind. Maybe Christmas would be different. Maybe I'd be included this time. Maybe Joanna would remember the way we used to string popcorn together, how her father always hung the first ornament, how we'd sing carols slightly off-key while peeling oranges beside her. But now I saw the truth. That message, well intended, maybe I had laid it bare. They had enough to share, but not enough to include. It wasn't the food I wanted. It was the gesture, the chair, the reach of an arm pulling another into the circle. And they had none of that left for me. That night I took down the fall garland from the mantel. The leaves were paper, a bit faded now. I placed them gently into the storage box beside the small ceramic pumpkin Joanna made in 3rd grade. I wrapped it in tissue like it was sacred, because once it had been. I didn't cry, but something inside me folded the way old fabric does when it's been pressed too many times along the same crease. I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed early. The house seemed to understand. It didn't protest, just settled around me with a soft resignation of walls that had heard too many silences. In the morning I brewed tea but didn't drink it. I sat by the window watching a neighbour walk her dog in a red sweater. She waved. I waved back. I almost believed for a second that today might feel lighter. But the phone remained quiet. No follow-up. No call. No suggestion of a visit. Just the lingering scent of chicken and the knowledge that I had been remembered as an afterthought. And isn't that worse than being forgotten? Because to be forgotten is a mistake. To be remembered and still left out is a choice. It's strange the moment when you realise there's nothing left to hope for. It doesn't come with thunder. There's no grand heartbreak, no storm. Just a kind of stillness. Like someone shut the door behind you, softly, and you're standing in the quiet afterward, listening to your own breath. That's where I found myself. Not angry, not crying, just empty. I sat in the sewing room, surrounded by fabric I hadn't touched in months. The thread spools, the dull scissors, the jar of buttons sorted by colour, they were all there, just as I'd left them. Waiting. But my hands didn't move. I couldn't remember the last thing I'd made. I used to lose hours in here. Stitching, piecing, creating something from scraps. Joanna's dresses when she was little. Table runners for every season. Quilts for the babies. I stitched my love into every seam. Now the machine sat covered in a layer of dust, like a monument to a former life. I stood and crossed the bookshelf, running my fingers along the spines. Cookbooks. Gardening manuals. A novel I never finished. All those dog-eared pages, all those margins filled with notes like I thought someone would one day care to read them. I picked up a framed photo. Me and Joanna. She was 10, front teeth missing, both of us in matching aprons dusted with flour. We were laughing, you could see it, not just in our mouths, but in our eyes. That was before she learned how to smile without me. I set the photo back down. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through molasses. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, stared at the rotisserie chicken again. Still wrapped, still untouched. I thought about throwing it out, but I didn't have the energy. Instead, I closed the door, sat down, and just sat. I don't know how long I stayed like that. The light shifted across the floor. The shadows stretched. Somewhere a car door slammed. A child laughed on a nearby lawn. I heard it all from far away, like I was underwater. There is a kind of tide they don't warn you about. The tide that comes not from exertion, but from being invisible. From giving and never quite being enough to keep anyone close. I thought of the years I spent building this family. All the rides, the meals, the favours, the late-night phone calls, the bills paid without being asked, the lullabies hummed when fevers ran high. And now here I was not just alone, but erased. It would have been easier, maybe, if there had been some explosive fight. Something to point to and say, there, that's when they turn away. But there wasn't. It happened in increments. A missed call here. I've forgotten thank you there. A quiet substitution of someone else in my seat. And every time I told myself it's okay. They're busy. It's just this once. Until it wasn't just once. Until I was watching my own traditions from a photograph on someone else's screen. I leaned forward, cradled my head in my hands, and let the weight settle. Not crying. I haven't cried in a long time. Tears are for those who still expect to be heard. No, this was different. This was bone deep. A knowing that clung like damp air. I thought about calling Joanna, saying something, asking not for an apology, not even for acknowledgement, just for the truth. Did you mean to leave me out? But I didn't call, because I already knew the answer. She hadn't meant to hurt me. She'd just stopped seeing me. And maybe that's what broke me most of all. I stood up finally and walked to the hallway. There, in the closet, was the box. The one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were letters from my husband. Receipts from our first apartment. A scarf my mother knit before her hands gave out. I touched each item like a rosary. A life catalogued in fragments. I found the card Joanna gave me the year her youngest was born. "We couldn't do this without you, Mom." Written in her hand, thick with sincerity. I almost believed that back then. Now I folded the card shut and placed it at the bottom of the box. That's where things belong now, beneath layers. Out of sight. Preserved but no longer part of the daily rotation. And maybe that's what I was becoming too. Preserved, but no longer part of the picture. I didn't light a candle that night. Didn't set a place. Didn't open the laptop. I just brushed my teeth, folded my robe at the end of the bed, and lay down with the light off. There was no sleep. Just stillness. Just me and the sound of the wind against the windows. And somewhere, very faint, the whisper of my own voice saying, "I used to matter here." The morning after I lay in the dark, waiting for sleep that never came, I woke before the sun. Not because I'd rested or hadn't, but because my body, like always, rose with habit. The sky outside was still more night than day. That deep, uncertain blue before the world decides what it will be. The streetlights hummed. The house groaned as the heat kicked on. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, my feet not yet reaching the floor, hands resting on my knees. My slippers were by the nightstand just as they always were. I didn't put them on. Instead, I stared at the floor. The kind of stare that doesn't look for anything, just acknowledges everything. The dust beneath the dresser. The nick in the wood from where my husband once dropped his shaving mirror. Faint imprint in the carpet where the laundry basket usually sat. My life laid out in small domestic ruins. In the kitchen, I turned on the kettle out of instinct, not desire. I didn't want tea. I didn't want anything. But I waited for the boil. It's a strange thing, how we go through motions even when the meaning has drained away. I'd spent the last year, maybe longer, moving through my life like I was still visible. Like someone was watching. But no one was. That much had become clear. The leftovers message from Joanna still sat unopened on my phone. I hadn't answered. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I couldn't bear to read it again. A smiley face at the end of that little digital shrug. I opened the drawer by the stove. The one where I kept everything useful, pens that barely worked, rubber bands, expired coupons, a small notepad with a rooster on the cover. I pulled out the notepad, and I stared at the blank page. I used to make lists every day. Meals to plan, groceries to get, birthdays to remember. The paper would fill quickly, scribbled with purpose. But this page was empty, and it asked something of me I hadn't expected, a choice. I picked up a pen. Not to write tasks, there were none, but to see what my hand would do. At the top of the page, I wrote, "What I gave." I paused. Then, under it, 32 Thanksgivings hosted. Joanna's first car, paid in full. 4 years of after-school pickups for Henry. The down payment for the house. The casserole dish. The recipe book. My time. My softness. My silence. I stopped there. Not because the list was finished, but because my hand was shaking. On the next page I wrote, "What I got." And beneath it I stared. I thought hard. I tried to be generous. But only one thing came to mind. Leftovers. I closed the notebook. Something shifted. Not a roar. Not a blaze. Just a small, necessary click. Like a door unlocking. I stood up and looked around my kitchen. The light had changed, softer now. Brushing the linoleum like an apology. The table was still set for one. The fridge still hummed with old food. Nothing around me had changed. But something inside me had. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the faintest flicker of something I hadn't recognized in a long time. Not hope. Not yet. But resolve. I wasn't going to beg. Not for inclusion. Not for recognition. Not even for honesty. But I was done pretending that being forgotten was okay. Done folding myself into corners so others could stretch out without guilt. I wasn't sure what came next. Not yet. But I knew it wouldn't be more of the same. That was enough for now. That was the beginning. The catalogue had been sitting on the hall table for 3 weeks. One of those glossy mailers that usually goes straight into the recycling. Too many pictures, too many places I couldn't see myself in anymore. But that morning I didn't throw it out. I picked it up. The front cover showed a woman standing on a wraparound porch, sunlight on her face, a blanket shawl around her shoulders. She looked maybe 60, maybe 70. Hard to tell. What struck me wasn't her smile, but the way she held her cup like she was allowed to enjoy it. Like she belonged in that quiet, wide-open place. I took the catalogue to the kitchen table, poured myself a cup of tea I actually wanted. Then I began to flip through. Bed and breakfasts. Weekend escapes. Seasonal packages. Little cottages tucked between mountains. Others with beachfront porches and clawfoot tubs. All the kinds of places I used to think were for other people. People with company. People with purpose. But as I turned each page, a thought settled over me, calm, unshaken. I don't need anyone's permission to find peace. I set the catalogue aside, wiped my hands on my robe, and walked to the sewing room. In the back of the closet, behind the boxes of old linens and half-used wrapping paper, was my luggage. The good suitcase. The one with the leather trim and the quiet wheels. I hadn't used it since Thomas passed. I pulled it out and laid it flat on the bed. Then I stood there a long moment. I wasn't sure where I was going yet, but I knew I was going. That night I booted up the old desktop computer in the guest room. It took a few tries. The machine groaned like I'd woken it from hibernation. When it finally blinked to life, I searched the name of one of the inns from the catalogue. A bed and breakfast in South Carolina. Old Victorian house. Pale yellow shutters. Breakfast served on a screened porch. I clicked to book. 3 nights. Christmas Eve through the 27th. Queen room. Garden view. No children under 12. I paused at the payment screen. Then I typed in my card number, the same card I'd used last summer to cover Henry's summer camp when they were short. I'd never been paid back. I didn't ask. This time I used it for me. When the confirmation came through, I printed it out and tucked it into the front of my suitcase. Then I opened my closet and began to pack. Not just clothes. Not just the navy blouse I always liked but never wore, the soft scarf with the pale pink roses. But other things too. My hairbrush with the worn bristles. My favourite tea. A photograph of Thomas and me from our 30th anniversary, the one where we were both sunburned and laughing, the wind doing awful things to my hair. By the time I zipped the suitcase closed, the house felt different. Still silent. Still full of shadows. But now the silence was mine. Chosen. The next morning I drove to Joanna's house. The box sat on the passenger seat beside me. Inside, the recipe book, the tablecloth, and the photo of that first Thanksgiving, the one with the hand turkeys taped to the wall and Henry grinning with peas in his nose. I didn't ring the bell. Just left the box on her doorstep with a note tucked underneath. For when you remember who taught you tradition. No anger. No accusation. Just a simple line. A small reminder. On the way home, I stopped at the post office. Mailed a card to myself at the inn. Just my name and the address on the front. Inside it said, "You made it." That night I didn't eat at the kitchen table. I sat in the living room, plate in my lap, watching the fireplace and the television, one of those looping videos with crackling logs and flickering light. It was enough. More than enough. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't waiting to be seen. I saw myself. I didn't leave a forwarding address. Not because I wanted to disappear, not quite, but because I didn't want to explain. Some things don't need to be announced. They just need to be done. On the morning I left, the sun hadn't yet gone past the rooftops. The frost still clung to the car's windshield in delicate lace. I let the engine warm while I stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, looking back at the house. The porch light was still on. I hadn't meant to leave it, but I didn't go back to switch it off. Let it shine. I locked the door and slid the spare key through the mail slot, the way my husband used to do when we went on long weekends. This time there was no one to wave from the passenger seat. Just me. And the suitcase. Before I got in the car, I did one last thing. I walked to the mantel of the place where the family portrait used to hang, where I'd once been the centrepiece in a photograph full of practice, smiles and subtle distance. I'd taken it down weeks ago, of course, but the wall still held its outline. A faint square of brighter paint. It burst. From the drawer I took a smaller frame. Not silver or grand, just simple wood, smooth with age. Inside it the photo I'd chosen. Thanksgiving 1989. The real one. Thomas carving the turkey. Joanna with her mouth full of stuffing. The twins still in booster seats. Me in the background, laughing with my head tilted back, unaware, unposed. Full of life. I hand that photo in the empty space. It clicked softly into place. That was my goodbye. Not to the house. Not to the kitchen or the garden or the teacups lined up just so. But to the role I'd held for so long. The quiet shape I bent myself into, the host, the helper, the placeholder. The one who waited. The one who softened so others didn't have to. That version of me had earned her rest. Before I left, I lit the candle in the centre of the table. The one I'd never burned on Thanksgiving. And I let it flicker as I closed the door behind me. At the post office, I dropped a second card into the slot. No return address. Just the words. They kept it small. I kept my dignity. I didn't sign it. Joanna would know. By the time I reached the highway, the sun was rising. Pale gold poured across the dashboard. My hands in the wheel didn't tremble. The radio played something old and familiar. I didn't sing along. Just listened. For once I wasn't late. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't holding space for anyone else's plans. I was simply going. The bed was softer than I expected. High thread count sheets. Pillows like clouds. A small lamp glowed beside the headboard, casting haunted light across the floral wallpaper. Outside, a garden stirred beneath morning dew, birds weaving their songs between branches that didn't need me for anything. I didn't unpack all at once. I hung the navy blouse, folded the scarf. Placed my book on the nightstand, my tea on the windowsill, and the photo of Thomas and me on the dresser just beside the dish of wrapped peppermints the innkeeper had left as a welcome. There was no schedule here. No duties, no casseroles, no balancing acts. Just time. Time I hadn't realised I'd been denying myself for years. That first afternoon I walked into town. Waved at strangers who waved back. Bought a coffee from a quiet little shop with a crooked sign. Sat by the waterfront and watched a boy teach his younger sister how to skip stones. No one recognised me. And for the first time, that didn't feel like erasure. It felt like freedom. I visited an art gallery. Spoke to the woman behind the desk for nearly an hour about a painting of a tree bending in the wind. She said, "It looks like it's going to break." I said, "It won't." We both smiled. Back at the inn, I sat on the porch in the late afternoon, watching the shadows stretch across the hydrangeas. The air smelled like salt and honeysuckle. A couple passed by, hand in hand, and the woman waved with 2 fingers. I raised my tea in reply. That night I dined at a small table for one. No fuss. No performance. Just a warm bowl of soup and bread so soft it nearly sighed when torn. No one apologised for forgetting me. No one handed me cold pie in plastic wrap. No one remembered my name, and that, too, was peace. Because this time I had chosen the quiet. And it had answered back. On Christmas morning I woke with the sun on my face. Not the sharp, sterile light of a house too clean from waiting, but a golden wash that made everything feel possible. I brewed the tea I brought from home. Sat in the window seat with my knees tucked beneath me. Opened the card I'd mailed myself. "You made it." 3 words. Handwritten. My own voice. And for the first time in a long, long while I believed it. I didn't check my phone. If there were messages, they could wait. If there weren't, I hadn't left anything behind that I needed to chase. Instead, I walked down to the beach. The tide was low, the sand damp and cool beneath my shoes. I slipped them off. Let the water brush my ankles. And I breathed. Not with the shallow inhale of someone holding in their ache, but fully. Slowly. Like the ocean was reminding me that I was still here. Whole. Not needed. Not missed. But not broken. Later I posted a photo. Just my feet in the sand. A corner of blue sky. The caption read, "No turkey, no lies, just peace." The comments came in slowly. Old friends. A neighbour or two. A cousin I hadn't seen in years. "You deserve better. This looks beautiful. Good for you, sweetheart." And I replied simply, "I gave better for years, not bitter. Just true." That night, as I curled beneath the quilt in my room, the innkeeper knocked lightly on my door. She handed me a plate of cookies wrapped in a cloth napkin. "From our table to yours," she said. I thanked her. She didn't linger. Didn't ask questions. Just gave gently. I sat in bed with a cookie and a book, the ocean murmuring through the window like a lullaby. And I thought, let them keep the crowded table. Let them laugh around my dish, forgetting whose hands season their comfort. Let them remember when they're ready. Or don't. I've already remembered myself.